When talking about Smith's tenure as the 11th Doctor, there are interesting takes and not so interesting takes. The consensus was he was a great Doctor who had questionable scripts and acting moments. This is true. The man could not do pain, it was kinda cringe. Many people comment on the fact that David's exit harmed Smith's run through his now controversial line,
I don't want to go.
However, I could do a whole video on how this line didn't affect Smith and how brilliant this was for a final line, but that's not what we're here to discuss. Smith, on reflection, shares more characteristics and writing flaws from which Jodie suffered, just not so blatant in its execution. Moffat has spoken at length about what the Doctor represents, even going so far as to dedicate a whole story to it with Silence in the Library and Forest of the Dead. Nothing against those two episodes, they are incredible, but it did set the precipice on what's to come with Moffat in the future. So what happened? From the beginning of 2010, Russell was gone. Tennant was gone, Moffat was head honcho, and Smith took on as a leading man. Series 5 premiered on the 3rd of April with the 11th hour and ended on the 26th of June with the Big Bang. The season is praised by both fans and critics alike. It consists of a strong companion and plenty of variety for locations and adversaries, which culminated in an ambitious finale sowing the seeds for the downfall of the run at large. This video will highlight the many problems and shortcomings which led to the unfortunate end of Smith's run, and as much as everyone doesn't want to admit it, it all started at the beginning. Doctor Who is a strange show. The Doctor is a very flawed protagonist, to put it lightly. This is showcased at length through Russell's era with the likes of Eccleston and then later Tennant. What makes the Doctor so fascinating is he's essentially a god who takes pity on the human race and shows them the stars through the lens of a surrogate or companion, if you will. The essential component to the execution of a working relationship is the ability of the companion to challenge the Doctor. This was shown through all of Russell's era. Prominent moments featured are Rose at the climax of Dalek, Martha in Gridlock, Donna in, well, yeah, any episode. What makes these moments powerful is that the Doctor reflects and learns from them. Dalek marks the end of the Doctor's weapon nature. Look back on any episode before Dalek. Anti-plastic, the heat of the sun, the gas exchange, a literal missile, BFG. After this point, the Doctor stops using means to kill enemies, and it all stems from Rose's line.
What the hell are you changing into?
This conversation allows the Doctor to reflect on his rhetoric of violence. Look what happens after this point. Someone else stops the threat, someone else stops the threat, someone else stops the threat, and, well, yeah, someone else stops the threat. The personification of the Ninth Doctor, so full of hatred and regret, shifts as he comes to accept himself as a better man by the end of the season. This structure has the danger of becoming formulaic, however this point works so well in Season 4 that it's actually genius.
You take ordinary people and you fashion them into weapons.
My point is that the companion should in a sense challenge the Doctor, positioning themselves as the voice of reason, solidifying a progression of the character going forward. Does Amy do this for 11? Amy Pond is a very bland companion. As a favourite of the fandom, many people ignore her toxic traits and harassment of the Doctor. Even watching this in 2010 made me feel uneasy. But believe it or not, the interest of Amy is second nature. It all stems from Rory. Remove Rory and Amy becomes Season 7 Clara. Comparing the relationship between Mickey and Rose and then Rory and Amy, Rose has more going for her than just Mickey. Amy doesn't have any family members to relate to for plot reasons. Amy doesn't have a job which reflects her character. Yeah, thanks for that, Moffat. Amy has her redhead feist from being Scottish, and that is her character. It's not a bad start. This could lead to many disagreements with the Doctor as they have differing opinions on things. Well, no, not really. Past the Beast Below, this never happens. The closest instance is Amy's choice. Speaks for itself, really. So she locks the Doctor by his tie in the 11th hour until he explains exactly what's going on, and then she lets the Star Whale free in the Beast Below. Both of these moments are strong aspects of her building a relationship with the Doctor. It feels as if it's a rite of passage moment which cements them both, similar to the fires of Pompeii. But that's it. Both of these instances do not give insight to her character because she isn't consistent from this episode going forward. Victory of the Daleks, Time of Angels, Flesh and Stone, Vampires of Venice, Amy's Choice, The Hungry Earth, Cold War, Vincent and the Doctor, The Lodger, Well, yeah, that one makes sense. The Pandora opens in the Big Bang. Do you want to know what they all have in common?
Tell me.
She acts like an NPC to everything around her whenever the Doctor is in the vicinity. This is fundamentally a flaw in the writing department of the character. The only characteristic which Amy possesses is that she's feisty. Sometimes. And of course...
She's really good. It's just a shame that she's so wee and dumpy. And I nipped out for a minute, and I saw Karen walking along the corridor towards me, and I realised she's 5'11", slim and gorgeous. I thought, oh, that'll probably work. And then she gave an absolutely stunning, hilarious addition.
Wow, Moffat, just wow. Combine this approach with a Doctor hell-bent on trying to be the hero 24/7 without any character development, and you have a first season which is filled with whimsy and adventure but lacking soul and substance. Season 5 began this change in direction by focusing primarily on the Doctor as the audience surrogate. The use of the mystery attributed to the girl who waited and then later to the impossible girl creates a barrier between the audience and the character, making them hard for the audience to latch onto for familiarity. These titles are pseudonyms for blank slates, as it were. Imagine if Donna was given the tagline, "The girl who kept bumping into the Doctor." It cements the tone in which Moffat's era was. A fairy tale. The fairy tale arc could work with this belief that the Doctor is this mythical entity who appears to young children as an angel of sorts. The juxtaposition of reality slapping the characters in the face would have been an efficient use of storytelling. The Doctor's world is dark, twisted, and dangerous. However, this is never explored in the season, holding weight to the theme of the terrifying essence of maturity and growing up. Amy essentially runs away with a stranger on the night before her wedding, no less. The reasoning for their partnership is the fact that they're both running from reality, living in a fantasy. This is a fantastic foundation to build off and challenge the perception of this belief of running forever, but the aspect is never explored within the confines of the characters in question. Russell's era is so strong through character work because every progression point shifts the dynamic of every relationship. Rose questions the fact that she just ran off with a total stranger in the end of the world. Aliens in London gives weight to the reality of travelling in time and the loss of normalcy, which is paramount to being human, making Rose reflect on 1, the monotony of her life, and 2, the realisation that even through time travel, you will still miss moments. Boomtown solidifies the fact that there is a world separate from Rose. Mickey tries to move on because what else can he do? Rose acting like it's a holiday is detrimental to Mickey's mental health after being accused of a murder for an entire year, until she finally makes her decision to embrace the life of a time traveller. She escapes with the Doctor to this world of excitement, fun and games casually running through time, until the hubris catches up with them in the form that they essentially create Torchwood through their casual attitude to their actions. And it destroys her life. That is so much development for one character using internal and external factors to craft a narrative which the audience follows. The importance of a family dynamic in Doctor Who is vital. You need an anchor to real life, something to stop you from feeling like, I can travel like this forever. This is why Rory joining the TARDIS team halfway through the season doesn't work. Rory is such a strange character. Having more character development than that of Amy for one is an interesting perspective. Allowing the secondary character to hold the audience perspective is a welcomed change. However, his hang-ups of the Doctor's nature could have been executed cleaner. He stands as a moral compass for the Doctor and Amy, but he shouldn't have to. His speech in Vampires of Venice is completely void of any emotional weight through his lack of knowledge of their adventures, so to comment on how dangerous the Doctor makes people around him feels out of place. Rory should have questioned why they both went away in the first place. I would have liked Rory's relationship as a conduit to tension in the dynamic throughout the season, but he flip-flops constantly on whether he agrees with what's going on, making him have the emotional presence related to that of a hat stand in the room. You use it, and then you forget about it. I'm not cynical enough to ignore the pressure Smith was under after Tennant's departure. Regeneration is a lottery in the sense you can't control how you'll feel with the outcome, so to this extent, it's a task to win over a fanbase again and again. This increases exponentially with the weight and cultural impact Tennant had on the populace. Smith had everything running against him. This further cements the amount of emphasis placed on him succeeding in his first season. I would argue he succeeded in this, demonstrating a portrayal of that playful nature which comes with the territory of inhabiting an old mind in a young body, but also reserved in these moments of ruthlessness. The scales tilt towards the playful nature, but Smith does well with the other moments too. His eyes have this quality to them where you can tell the guilt and the experience this man has held over the years, but it doesn't come out as often as I'd like, especially as the seasons go on. Season 5 is Smith's most consistent for characterization. Considering there are so many punch-the-air wow moments from Smith without any emotional resonance to go with it, it's impressive his portrayal is still good. People will hate me for this, but the scene where he calls back the Atraxi is cringe. The sense of him stating I'm the Doctor is a powerful moment, sure, but all it conveys is this sense of glorification he places upon himself. The first season is full of these moments, from the monologue to Bob before shooting the gun and explaining that the one thing you don't ever put in a trap if you're smart smart if you value your continued existence. If you have any plans about seeing tomorrow, there's one thing you never ever put in a trap. Me. I get it, it's a cool line, very cool action man, but the self-gratifying incarnation the Doctor encapsulates is not vain. I could see David doing something like this, sure, but I'm glad he never did because it's just cringe. It all comes ahead at the Pandorica. This monologue may well be one of the worst things ever written in Smith's era, and for the life of me, I don't get why it's so beloved. Yes, the visual of everyone being up in the air and him being on the ground is cool. That's it. The dialogue is really bad.
Who takes the Pandorica takes the universe. But bad news, everyone. 'Cause guess who? Ha! Listen, you lot, you're all whizzing about. It's really very distracting. Could you all just stay still a minute? Because I am talking! Now, the question of the hour is, who's got Pandorica? Answer, I do. Next question, who's coming to take it from me? Come on! Look at me! No plan, no backup, no weapons worth a damn. Oh, and something else I don't have. Anything to lose. So, if you're sitting up there in your silly little spaceship with all your silly little guns, and you've got any plans on taking the Pandorica tonight, just remember who's standing in your way. Remember, every black day I ever stopped you, and then, do the smart thing. Let somebody else try first.
I cannot describe how much I hate this speech. The sense of it almost being like a boxing announcement, it's so derivative of what the Doctor is. Even what people say is the point of the speech is to show the power he resides over. What River Song says bluntly in A Good Man Goes to War, a man who can turn an army around at the mention of his name. Yes, he can because he's smarter than everyone in the universe. Speeches like this feel redundant if they're self-absorbed. Capaldi has the best speeches of any incarnation. The difference between Capaldi and Smith is the educational factor. When 12 has a monologue, it's in service to those around him to stop and think, excluding Heaven Sent. It doesn't make him look good, it's the realisation of how dire the situation he's in is. It's never about him. Smith's is just look how awesome I am, or look how cool I am, I'm the Doctor, I'm Matt Smith. I could imagine the Doctor looking at himself in the mirror and gassing himself up before leaving with this speech. It's just cringe. That's the takeaway I have with Smith in Season 5. He's positioned as this incredible deity, as it were, who's the best in the room. The Doctor always has been, but I'd wager, alright maybe excluding Jodie, it's never been this forced in its execution. I don't like the characterisation of Smith's Doctor in terms of his arc or wow moments. Unfortunately, there isn't much left besides that. Smith has very few emotional moments in his run, and it's a shame because he's fantastic at them. He has that essence of complex emotion which is translated beautifully in a handful of scenes, but overall his demeanour throughout his run is either look how silly I am, or if you cross me, I may kill you. It's just not interesting. Moffat's insistence to create a black and white philosophy for the character simplifies this incarnation to either being the hero or the villain. There's no nuance in the character writing, leading Smith to embellish the character under the confines of what he's presented. Season 5 may well be one of, if not the most ambitious seasons of Doctor Who. It doesn't hold your hand, it expects you to keep up throughout the series. Steven tended to drip feed the narrative a little too much throughout his tenure. This is in contrast to Russell, who believed that Doctor Who should always be structured as a jumping on point. It didn't matter what you watched previously, you could enjoy what was being shown with small teasers leading to the finale. The crack in the wall is a brilliant narrative device, placing it in each episode as a nod would have been genius, but the overabundance of usage of the narrative mechanic dilutes the impact of the reveal at the end of the season. First in the 11th hour, teased in The Beast Below, and again in Victory of the Daleks before having a prominent role in Flesh and Stone. The climax of this story rests on the shoulders of explaining what the crack does. It's cool, but it pulls you out of the story being told at the time, muddling the execution of an otherwise great Alien-styled sequel to Blink. Cold Blood is its most visually effective instance, where the crack swallows Rory and we're shown a broken piece of the TARDIS. This is a mixed bag in my opinion, mainly because after seeing Rory die 2 episodes earlier, it feels kind of too soon to do something like this. The reveal of the broken piece of the charred TARDIS is incredible though, setting the stage for what's to come in the finale. Continuing this momentum, the moment the Doctor and Amy have in the TARDIS after this happens is so powerful. It's one of the few moments in Season 5 I feel the scene was written to allow the dialogue to service the characters instead of the plot. And it's from Chibnall. Wow, look at that. Moffat is an incredible writer. His knowledge of sci-fi is beyond both Russell and Chibnall. Looking at Forest of the Dead as an example, he shows how he can confidently craft a narrative which encompasses strong themes and concepts, but his character writing has always been his weakest point. The finale shows Moffat at the best and worst of his ability. Moffat's unhinged, if you will. On the one hand, you're delivered a deep narrative which explains on the conceptual level the force of the crack in time. Yes, you may not learn what it represents in the grand scheme of things, we'll get to that. The story is ambitious, some would argue too ambitious to the point where its execution is... well, no, you know what, yeah, I'll say it's convoluted, like it is really convoluted. You have the Stonehenge plot, River Song, a vision of an exploding TARDIS, the Pandorica under Stonehenge, the Alliance, Rory's back, Autons were now people. Seriously, this is a great idea. How has this not been made into a noir-style mystery of a hidden murder in a community where it's revealed that... sorry, I'm rambling. Amy dies, the Doctor is locked in the Pandorica, River discovers the whole set piece of the episode is a figment of Amy's imagination. This is all in one 15-minute episode, ending on a great cliffhanger, the build-up of all the plot points and players being moved on a chessboard keeps the audience guessing and intrigued to see what happens next week. The Big Bang is a lot. The episode opens with a red herring of Amelia Pond in an alternative reality. That's cool. Some moments don't make sense to the audience at the start, then the Pandorica opens, Amy is in it, Rory is mourning Amy, then the Doctor appears, and then again, Rory opens the Pandorica and gets the Doctor out, places Amy in it, the Doctor then travels back to the alternative reality with the Vortex Manipulator. They are setting the stage for the end of the universe thanks to an exploding TARDIS at the eye of the storm. Time shenanigans are front and centre with some insane moments which make your brain explode. Matt Smith is fantastic in this episode. How the Doctor uses the Vortex Manipulator like a drug is such a joy to watch. The use of the manipulator was hinted at during season 3. The Doctor's hatred of the tool feels like it's something inferior to normal time travel, but here, thanks to the universe being tiny, he's having a whale of a time, and it's so funny to watch, almost like a vice for him. And then the finale kicks off with the Doctor saving River, chucking the Pandorica into the TARDIS as it's looped its explosion over and over again. The power of the Pandorica mends the TARDIS, which begins to rewind the universe to the present day, fixing the timeline. The Doctor, however, was not to be included. His sense of dire circumstances and scared nature add weight to the inevitability of his death, ending with a fantastic execution of a scene back in episode 5. Watching this as a 10-year-old, my family spotted the change in the episode straight away, but the fact that it's at the beginning of the season is incredible foreshadowing. Then Amy uses her power of reality to bring the Doctor back thanks to overexposure of the crack in the wall. Okay, yep, fine, makes sense. Amy and Rory get married and season 5 draws to a close. So how did it all come together? Like I said at the beginning of this very long tangent, the story is immense. The amount of plot points, reveals, rug pulls, and excitement makes this ambitious conclusion something to behold. What's the big takeaway of the season? Nothing. It doesn't matter how amazing these plot points are, the characters have nothing going for them. Rory is probably closest with the reveal he protected Amy for 2,000 years. This isn't surprising, we know how much Rory loves Amy, but nothing happens which affects anyone bar Rory, who takes a more action-orientated role which makes him more formidable. Sometimes. That's it. Which in turn makes the entire story feel pointless. This sense of lack of character motivation and development was the first for the show, and although the high concept sci-fi elements are impressive, I don't think it's worth sacrificing a core philosophy of the show's structure in order to tell an ambitious story. For comparison, Russell's finales sacrificed the sense of high concept sci-fi for character drama, and I find the latter has aged better as time's gone on. Season 1 of Doctor Who teaches the Doctor the importance of mercy. Season 2 hardens the Doctor. Season 3 teaches the Doctor humility. Season 4 sees the Doctor learn the importance of consequence. This is without mentioning a single arc for a companion in this era, and yet it's still stronger than any of this season. Season 5 is just a fun romp where the universe explodes. Yeah, that's the big problem with Moffat's run with Smith. There is little to no emotional resonance, but there's no time to think about that because the Doctor becomes an omnipotent god who changes the course of this man's life to save his friends, in turn creating a paradox. But for some reason no one seems to mind about this instance. Christmas favourite for a lot of people. It's mid. Season 6 is the worst season of the revival before Chibnall. A cluster of plot points, lackluster payoffs, and just a mess of a season, beginning with the ever so fresh setup of the Doctor dying. Never seen this one before, and at the start of the season, no less. Stroke of genius, this one, Moffat. The Doctor without Amy and Rory is gallivanting through time, teasing them with key moments in history. A jokey approach I can accept due to the nature of the Doctor's sense of history interference. So the Doctor dies and invites his closest friends to witness his passing. The final TARDIS blue envelope being a younger version of the Doctor was a great reveal and leads to what I would argue is the best interaction of these 4 characters in Moffat's run. We have River being apprehensive and furious as she should be, Rory completely bewildered, Amy reassured but worried at the same time, and Smith just chewing up the scenery. This continues inside the TARDIS as Smith's incarnation demonstrates signs of childish behaviours as he finally confronts the group on who sent the letters. Genuinely, this scene is fantastic and establishes that there's bound to be some conflict in the dynamic of this season, something lacking in season 5. But then Amy reassures him that everything is alright when it isn't. Such a strong foundation to build off. The rest of the two-parter is ambitious but falls short. Despite the silence being visually stunning and a presence to be sure, the resolution of this episode is very un-Doctor. The realization that they're not fighting an alien invasion but rather leading a revolution is a great line, but the execution of this philosophy has the sonic screwdriver become a laser screwdriver as it is used to kill the silence. Rather than reasoning with the monster, the Doctor decides it's best to kill the invaders in a very violent manner, almost shifting back to his early 9th incarnation. This is baffling to me as a decision. Even having River be this gun-wielding murderer and portraying it as a positive adds doubt as to why the Doctor would ever fall for her. No, this finale is ridiculous to me. The two-parter ends with the little girl regenerating. In terms of the overall arc of the series, this episode does a lot in a little time. You have Amy trying to save the Doctor by killing the astronaut, in turn creating a paradox, possibly. Amy reveals she's pregnant. The girl inside the astronaut, Amy learns she could potentially be her mother. That's a lot for an opening. The shift of this heavily focused opening compared to Russell's era or even Moffat's was an interesting change. This could potentially mean that each episode was going to be connected somehow. And, well, yeah, they are. To save on time, we're going to go through each episode pointing out moments relating to the overall story, otherwise we're going to be here all day. But if I do focus on something, it's because it's significant. Curse of the Black Spot is forgettable, has a connection to the arc but nothing substantial. The Doctor's Wife is the best episode of the whole season, one of the few times in Smith's run where he's able to show raw emotion. I love his performance in this scene, it's so moving, showing this vulnerable factor to an incarnation so full of joy and energy. It's a rare thing to see and I wish there was more of it. The Rebel Flesh and the Almost People was an incredible concept executed rather blandly, but the episode isn't without merit. There are scenes where the Doctor and the Flesh Doctor exhibit traits of another going against their surface emotional range. The episode also includes the moment where the Doctor learns of his impending death delivered by Amy. The Doctor's outburst towards Amy is a powerful moment, which is the first step to allowing Amy the realization that the Doctor does in fact have a dark side. Positioning the audience in the same boat as Amy, believing that this is the Flesh Doctor, was a good decision. It allows the character and the audience to be shocked when the realization of what Amy prefers is a circumstantial version of the Doctor rather than the original. The two-parter may not be particularly good, but it has strong character moments. This all comes to fruition when the Doctor, who has been tracking Amy's pregnancy throughout the season, works out that she's actually a ganger. The cliffhanger at the end of this episode was excellent, showing that Amy hasn't been herself throughout the whole season strengthens the bond of the philosophy that gangers are basically human. The teasers of Madame Kavarian being bled through the subconscious of Amy was a wonderful reveal, leading to the end of the first half of season 6. A Good Man Goes to War is an episode which should work. The setup's there. Each character has a role to play in the outcome. The hype is massive. The resolution is effective, but my biggest qualm with the episode is it's stuff we already know. The message is that the Doctor has essentially become a general and rallied an army to fight for him. Yes, this is bad, but River stating the obvious is a moment which talks down to the audience so much it's like we're watching Chibnall. It'd be like having a companion all through David's special saying to him, "You're going off the deep end. This isn't you. Look what you're becoming. You'll cringe." The visuals and looks in this episode say more than words can illustrate. The moment with Colonel Runaway is dark and angry Doctor moment. Madame Kavarian being captured and the Doctor realising that this was all too easy should have been enough. Having River reinforce the message to the audience shows a lack of faith in the viewer. Karen Gillan is great in this episode. The amount of range she shows as her future is essentially ripped from her arms is powerful stuff, culminating in a brilliant moment where she confronts River with a gun. This is so dark and powerful for a companion to do, which would definitely be looked down upon by the Doctor, but he's gone. It shows this more ruthless side from Amy. A woman willing to do anything at the end of her tether is just great. The reveal of River Song being Melody Pond is good in terms of the similarities between the names, but the impact is lost somewhat because these companions haven't been built up well enough to warrant a reveal like this. And from this point, the series falls off a cliff. This is, without a doubt, the darkest, most emotional story a companion goes on in the revival, but I don't feel anything towards it, and it's mainly because all we have is the primary character's reflection on what happened. I spoke earlier about the importance of a family dynamic in Doctor Who and how it adds resonance to the weight to many moments in the companions' arcs. For example, the threat of the Master ruling the world and Martha going on this year-long odyssey would not have had the emotional weight it had if the Jones family wasn't affected by it. It's the outsider's perspective which holds the most weight, the essence of a normal person's reality being shattered through exposure to the Doctor. The fact that Amy has a family again thanks to the reboot of the universe and we never see them past that point is a wild misfire. The opportunity to have a scene where Amy is essentially broken from this moment, she could have gone back to see her mum and dad, devastated and comforted but unable to explain to them what has happened over the last year. Rory could be in this scene too, realising the weight and consequence of what travelling with the Doctor has done to their relationship. This would aid with the reveal later in the season that they were stepping away from travelling. This small scene sets up so much doubt, emotion and reflection on what happened in the whole episode. Rather than ending on the reveal of who River Song is, this needed to end with a moment which caused doubt in both the companions' ability to go forward with the Doctor. This is why creating these truly emotional arcs through a season which continues to have an episodic structure does not work. The wait for the second half of the season felt strange. The first time the show had done this, and from what I can tell, the reason was due to the involvement of BBC America. American TV shows don't operate in the same framework as British television. Shows take breaks to be able to be viewed throughout the runtime of the year. I believe this is what happened to season 6. I could be dead wrong, and maybe Moffat was making Sherlock, who knows, but the setting of Day of the Moon and the reveal of the BBC America forming does hold weight to the theory. Anyway, season 6 picks up with Amy and Rory trying to get the Doctor's attention in a crop field. This beginning is weird to me. You have Amy, who has been trying to find the Doctor for probably the same time frame as the show has been off air, to then create a message in a cornfield where she finally grabs his attention. The scene is done for spectacle but mostly to show the introduction of Mel. However, I refuse to believe that the Doctor didn't do some jiggery-pokery in Amy's smartphone in order to contact her. This incarnation of the TARDIS has a phone. It has a literal phone. The fact that the Doctor left her on Earth while he finds her daughter would have infuriated her, but she just casually asks him if he's found Melody yet. And that's it. The emotional turmoil in which Amy showed in A Good Man Goes to War is gone, and Amy is back to NPC companion again. The introduction of the character of Mel annoys a lot of people as to why she was never mentioned before now. To be honest, I don't really care. Most of the characters in Moffat's era come and go constantly, so I don't know why people get so annoyed with this one character. It was shown that everyone who Amy was close to bar Rory was erased by the crack in the wall, and her parents who we saw at the wedding are never seen again. So to call out Mel for being this exact thing is so strange to me. Let's Kill German Man is pointless as a location for an episode, chosen clearly to add intrigue to keep the viewing figures up. The episode could have been set anywhere with a controversial figure, as the Tesseract focuses on criminals throughout time. But yeah, for a meta-commentary on what people expect and then subverting their expectations, you're left with a rather bland, predictable and condescending episode. Yeah, thanks Moffat. The reveal of Mel being Melody was... no, I don't even care. The reveal that the Silents want the Doctor dead before the question can be asked is interesting, but again, is a mystery box of things to come. Can we just focus on one episode? Just for once, just please. But yeah, we have set up our Deus Ex Machina, River Song and Amy and Rory returning to the TARDIS. That's the ep, that's the whole thing. Wow. Night Terrors is a fun romp which ignores everything going on in the series arc for a fun adventure. This doesn't work. You have Amy and Rory accepting the fact that their child is gone, they will never see their child again, but we return to the light-hearted shenanigans of the trio on a chill adventure which just so happens to centre around a child. There is no moment in the episode where Amy stops to think that they are saving a child when they couldn't save hers. She could have explored a nursery in the impressive set of the Doll's House to reflect just for a moment on what has happened in her life to cause a reaction to what's left with travelling. These are pivotal missed opportunities of finally shattering the illusion that travelling with the Doctor is all fun and games with no consequences. They should have realised this after Demon's Run, but they don't, they never do. The Girl Who Waited is the second best episode of the season, written by Tom McRae, the only episode which in my opinion sells Amy and Rory as this loving couple. It's a beautifully written story featuring Amy trapped on the planet of Apalachia. Rory has to travel to that timeline in order to rescue her, only to find a much older, battle-hardened Amy. This is without a doubt the most emotional instance of the two characters. It's acted brilliantly, the story has a purpose and cements this growing rift between Rory and the Doctor. We finally see a version of Amy who understands who the Doctor is, someone who at this point shouldn't even be tolerated. The Doctor acting cold, alien and unsympathetic to the whole ordeal, showing just how unconnected he is to the pair in terms of emotion. His philosophy of never looking back because he's too afraid of what he'll find is personified perfectly through the eyes of Amy, the first face his face saw. It's incredible. The status quo at the end of the episode does something in which is never done again for the 11th Doctor. He retreats into the TARDIS to allow Amy and Rory to share a moment alone. The Doctor is the Doctor for the first time in the whole of Smith's tenure in this moment. He's the villain of the episode in which he always should have been, finally feeling like a three-dimensional character, showing his light-hearted side, ruthless side and manipulative side, all while being organically shown. Rory's line where he reiterates,
"You're turning me into you,"
is so powerful. It's the realisation that's been building on and off for 2 years finally revealing itself. It's character work in which I wish Moffat explored, on top of beautifully written dialogue between both Rory and Amy to the point where they feel like different characters to the rest of the season. The heavy lifting this episode does for their relationship cannot be commended enough. The God Complex then undoes all of this and sets the characters back to factory settings. The reasoning is to show that the problem isn't the Doctor being a conduit for the destruction of their lives, it's the realisation that Amy still has faith in the Doctor knowing he'll fix everything, but at this point, she should know this is folly. The amount of turmoil and stress the Doctor has caused her is beyond anything else seen from a companion in the revival. The Doctor and Rory are also on good terms again, only sharing one confrontation with each other over the death of Howie. Rory and the Doctor should be disagreeing with everything at this point, but the episode's message is the fact that the Doctor is the lonely god destined to outlive all. This episode isn't bad, it just doesn't fit with where all the characters should be at this moment in the story. The ending of this episode reinforces this belief as the Doctor buys Amy and Rory a house and leaves them to face his fate. Having this episode after the previous adds a sense of selfishness to the Doctor, almost as if his fear isn't losing them in the literal sense, but rather creating the reality of what old Amy was, their inevitability of resenting him. This would have been a fantastic moment solidifying the Doctor's incarnation as someone who can't and will not accept change. But of course, this wasn't what the episode was illustrating. The reason he does this is because they're both still themselves and he doesn't want to tarnish that. Even from a companion standpoint, this should have been a moment where Amy and Rory finally realise that the Doctor gets it, almost as if they were staying on for his well-being. But no, the episode paints the scene with the connotation that they were happy to continue travelling with him and it's him who had to give them up, which is wild. From everything that has happened in the season, even in the previous episode, it's just baffling. Closing time is great. It allows Smith to use his comedic timing while being one last hurrah before the end, so his characterization makes complete sense in the confines of this outing. The moment he shares with Alfie in the nursery is really powerful and feels like an acceptance of what's to come. Craig and the Doctor work so well together, past Corden before he became cringe. The only thing that's terrible in this episode is the kids at the end. They all look at the Doctor and make it out like they know him from the future, which is just strange because the Doctor never comes back. Right, the wedding of River Song. One episode to wrap up River Song, the Tesselector, Amy and Rory, Madame Kavarian, the Impossible Astronaut, the Silence, the Death of the Doctor. Do they do it to a satisfying level? No, of course not. This episode is a mess of a finale. We have another alternative reality again. Very original. River creates a paradox by not killing the Doctor. The world is all gobbledygook and Rory and Amy don't know each other. Again. Madame Kavarian is captured, the universe is called to save the Doctor, the Silence are captured and then they escape. The Doctor marries River to basically get her to listen to him. Kind of a weird way of displaying your love, but alright. River learns the Doctor's name for the Forest of Dead to make sense, but nope, she doesn't. The Doctor reveals he's inside the Tesselector instead. So when he dies, I'm guessing this was just a particle effect. The Doctor cheats death, Amy and Rory return home thinking their daughter killed the Doctor, then it's revealed she didn't, everyone's happy and the Doctor realises he's gotten too big, so he pretends to kill himself to quiet down the universe. That's it. That's season 6. Literally the only moment I think is worth the payoff of this season is when Amy kills Madame Kavarian. It's a horrible moment that feels completely justified after everything she's experienced for one episode. I'm sorry. But in all seriousness, it is a good scene. I understand the revelation that the Doctor got too loud and powerful. This is a good arc if he learnt from it going forward. But he doesn't, so it's pointless, and once again we are left with a colossal mess of a season which doesn't change anyone's mental state going forward, so the whole thing was a waste of time. Starting to see a pattern here. I'm not sure what happened with this season, but what it demonstrates is that Doctor Who works best as a show which hints at a larger narrative rather than shoving it down your throat. The emotional core of this season is decaying. It's constantly being thrown in the forefront of episodes and then retreating for others. This leads to an extremely frustrating watch where the audience is forced to split character arcs depending on the view of the writer. This is a mistake. It sends younger audiences away due to boredom and trying to keep up. It frustrates older viewers who can't work out where everyone's mental state is from moment to moment. This becomes infuriating when all the momentum and patience is thrown out the window for a Deus Ex Machina ending, where no one changes from this development. This is without a doubt the worst season of New Who before Chibnall. My god, that was a lot. Season 7 is criticised for being one of the worst seasons of the revival, and I don't see why. Granted, the first half isn't good, but it doesn't waste your time with promises like Season 6, so this part will probably be quite short. Asylum of the Daleks points out a factor which feels shoehorned in: Rory and Amy divorce each other. The reason being is that they just drift apart. Yeah, sure. In reality, it's because Rory wants kids and Amy can't have any thanks to Demon's Run, so Amy gives him up. Rory, upset that she thought so little of him, mends the relationship and they get back together. The notion the two could separate was never on the table. Amy loves Rory in a rather subtle way. She'll insult him and be distant, but when the moment arises, it's clear how she feels. So this forced conflict is just that. Forced. Oh, and the introduction of the Impossible Girl. Dinosaurs on a Spaceship introduces us to the first returning family member of this era. Brian is great. He's apprehensive, resourceful, and cares about Amy and Rory, which is exactly why the Power of 3 speech is so effective. Cube Man. A Town Called Mercy has Matt get angry. A little too angry, I might add, although it does have a strong character moment from Amy showing just how long they have travelled together.
See, this is what happens when you travel alone for too long. Well, listen to me, Doctor. We can't be like him. We have to be better than him.
Alright, that's everything. The Angels Take Manhattan is conceptually interesting. The book effect is great. River Song. The Statue of Liberty is an angel. Wow, the Angels really did go downhill since Blink, didn't they? Rory dies again, and then he dies again, but with Amy, and then he dies for real, and Amy finally joins him because she loves him, and so it ends the journey of Amy Pond and Rory Williams. I'm in the minority here where I felt nothing from this ending. The structure of Season 6 was building to a sense of a wedge between the Doctor and Amy, or alternatively reflecting on her actions casually travelling through time without dealing with the consequences. That's my big takeaway of Moffat's arc of his first companion. I felt hollow. A character can only show so many traits of themselves internally. This is why external factors are essential for insight about primary characters. When the only character you show for this role is 100% infatuated with said character, you have no other viewpoint of their personality. This has the connotations of creating a one-dimensional character, which is exactly what Amy becomes, changing her personality to suit the episode rather than being consistent. I don't like Amy Pond as a character for that reason. I don't know her. The fact that the Doctor never went back to talk to Brian about what happened is crazy. Smith closes himself off to the responsibility of being the Doctor after this point, so it would make sense why he wouldn't have that conversation with Brian. But then again, there could have been a scene where the Doctor visits him from a distance, seeing him almost wait for the couple back in the present. Having the Doctor turn his back to this interaction would have given more weight to his cold nature in The Snowmen. I swear that wasn't a pun. The Snowmen is a fun Christmas romp where the Doctor is recluse, allowing the world to move on without him as he sulks in the clouds, like a Twitter Mary Poppins if you will. The special also introduces the main threat of the season, the Great Intelligence, first taking on the voice of Ian McKellen and then later Richard E. Grant. I don't have much to say about the villain at large. It's a catalyst for the plot rather than the character in itself. Nothing wrong with that, but it creates a rather hollow threat. Oh, and the Impossible Girl. Again. Clara Oswin Oswald is an interesting character which would have been a good companion for the Doctor. The sense that every revival companion has to come from modern day is strange to me. During Russell's tenure, I would say it was acceptable as the companion is the audience surrogate. This isn't the case with Moffat. We leave Amelia and follow the Doctor. We leave Clara and we follow the Doctor. So the only reason this incarnation is killed off is to add mystery to the Impossible Girl. Makes me wish modern day Clara was the one to die. It would create an interesting perspective destroying the safety net in which modern day is. It also would have created tension if Clara from Victorian London met someone the present day incarnation knew, allowing the Victorian Clara to question what's going on. Victorian Clara has a life, she's adaptable, operating in the two sides of Victorian society, a fully rounded character. Nah, she's dead. Season 7 Clara is criticised for being boring and bland. Yeah, go figure. Without any external factors for the audience to latch onto, yes, she is bland. However, The Bells of St. John is a fun opener to the second half of the season, consisting of 2 big teasers for arcs to come, without shoving it in your face. Maybe Moffat knew Season 6 was a mistake. This episode is just fun. The Doctor drives up the Shard. For the rest of the series, there isn't much to talk about. Apart from one brief moment in Journey to the Centre of the TARDIS, another instance of the writing not allowing the Doctor to be the focus of confrontation, thanks to the big friendly button, the notion that Clara was genuinely scared of the Doctor is washed away. Also this moment. Yeah, I feel the same way with Flesh and Stone with this one. Horny writers, honestly. Season 7B acts more as an early revival season of Who, stories of an episodic nature where banter ensues and danger amps up. They're fine. The fanbase hates this season for some reason when they're inoffensive, non-convoluted stories which just feel like a fun season. Smith is too silly at this point, but whatever, he hasn't had an arc through his entire run, so why develop him now? For a season more concerned with disconnected adventures without a single two-parter, the name of the Doctor kinda comes out of nowhere. Granted, you have the payoff with the Great Intelligence, Dorim heading up the conversation with the reveal of the oldest question hidden in plain sight. Okay, side note, to place this at the end of an already stuffed narrative which exhausted the fanbase was a bad decision. The question of who the Doctor's name was always going to be a difficult sell for a mystery, because you can't reveal the answer. Moffat knew this. So what you're left with is the reveal that the Doctor once again, for the third time in 3 years, meets his end, this time on the fields of Trenzalore. Trenzalore is a strange narrative decision, referenced in the Wedding of River song as the fall of the 11th, but what's interesting about this piece of information is the Doctor's reaction to Clara telling him about it. He sits on the sofa and breaks down. Matt Smith's most emotional moment, it's fantastic. However, I can't shake the feeling that the emotion is ruined almost from the fact that he's been told over the last 4 years that he's going to die in 4 different circumstances. So the scene feels rather hollow for such an exceptional performance in a season void of emotional moments. However, the resolution to this arc was placed on pause. During the year of 2013, the 50th anniversary of Doctor Who was ramping up excitement, so the reveal of the Doctor's tomb would only open at the mention of his name was rushed. Clara saving the Doctor from the Great Intelligence by entering his personal timeline closes the Impossible Girl arc quite well. The Doctor saves Clara, introducing us to John Hurt, the one Doctor who broke the promise of the name. In terms of a finale, it isn't one. It's a part 1 that went on hiatus in order for the 50th anniversary to take place. This is where Moffat bit off more than he could chew. The 50th was an event, marketed like crazy. The return of David Tennant and the introduction of John Hurt was brilliant. All 3 Doctors play off each other incredibly well. The continuation of the fact that no one hates the Doctor more than himself, Dreamlord moment. The plot centres around the last days of the Time War, opening with Clara now having a job randomly, much needed, but the last time we saw her she was trapped in the Doctor's time stream. The belief was that she would never exist again, but rather be broken in multiple points in history. But here she is. Alright. The episode is more about the celebration of 50 years, full of fan service payoffs and reveals. Nothing wrong with these points, however it never sat well with me that we saw the final days of the Time War. Sorry, I know, dead take, the Time War felt like a concept which was unfilmable. The mystic nature of the Nightmare Child, the could-be king and his armies and meanwhiles who never was, the war turned into hell, looks like the invasion in the Stolen Earth. Russell believed that we should never learn what happened in the Time War, and to the extent when he was asked to write a piece for the 50th anniversary, he was at first apprehensive before writing the last moments of the war, and I'm just going to read the description of those final moments. But the Daleks and the Time Lord scream in vain, too far away to stop him now, as the Doctor stands alone. He looks out from his eyrie, across a wreckage of 1,000 worlds. Below him, fragments of the Time War, broken reefs of Gallifrey and Skaro washed up into his backwater to rot. His creaking wooden platform shivers with ice. A mile high, atop of fragments of Morbius's red capital, its vile towers fused into the black friable spires of Yarveling's church. And yet the Doctor can see glimpses of Earth. The planet had been replicated 1,000,000 times to become the bullets fired into the Nightmare Child's skull, and now splinters of human society have gouged themselves into the wasteland below. Relics of Mumbai, shards of Manhattan, a satire of old London town, remnants of better days. Above him he feels the time lock solidify, sealing off the war from reality, and as his body tumbles out of existence into plasma space, then foul space, then beyond, the Doctor leans into the fall, head first, arms wide, diving into infinity. He wonders what age he finally reached. The Time War used years as ammunition. At the Battle of Roding's Wedding alone, he aged to 5 million and regressed to a mewling babe merely from shrapnel. Now the ache in his bones feels 1,000 years old? Well, call it 900, sounds better. This description alone shows how impossible the Time War was to comprehend. Diluting the conflict to a simple Dalek encounter sours the horrific nature of a war that needed to be sealed off from time. I understand why Moffat decided to conclude the story of the Time War in order to move on with the mythology of this ever-changing series, but I just don't like the execution. The idea that the Doctor didn't kill the Time Lords is a double-edged sword in my opinion. On the one hand, you have the catharsis that the Doctor never broke the promise of his name.
Never cruel or cowardly. Never give up. Never give in.
Sorry, I couldn't resist. However, it solidifies the fact that Moffat cannot allow the Doctor to be a flawed protagonist. The Time War arc is possibly one of the best arcs in the show's history. Without it, the revival doesn't work. The emotional core of the Doctor is to make up for that one day. The one day he couldn't save everyone. The loss of this realization, even if he believes it up to this point, dilutes the journey and rebirth the Doctor has had over the last 8 years. The structure of this show is that the showrunner will come and go, and canon can be rewritten. So I can't criticise Moffat from doing this, but it fundamentally changes the emotional resonance of Russell's run and how much this event changed the Doctor. To the point where I store 2 headcanons on rewatch, one where it happened, and one where it didn't. The 50th anniversary was received extremely well, but it's clear the toll this took on Moffat to the point where Smith's actual conclusion felt rushed, despite the fact it's been building for 3 years. As a finale, The Time of the Doctor is kind of a mess, without the building blocks being set for the foundation with Season 6 and the intersection of Day of the Doctor, the ending feels rushed. The silence is an afterthought from the antagonist angle in this episode, a far cry from the religious order which was prepared to destroy the universe to stop the Doctor learning what the cracks were for. They just accept the Doctor has reached Trenzalore and that's that. I said we'd learn what the crack in time was. Well, it's revealed that it's a time field. The Matrix on Gallifrey discovered the crack and uses the indication that the Time Lords could use it to escape the pocket dimension from the Day of the Doctor. This was the aspect the Silence was trying to stop the Doctor from orchestrating, the return of the Time Lords. With this revelation, the reasoning for altering the canon makes sense, but this is where I think the story loses people. Matt's run of the Doctor feels like homework. You have to be completely up to date to understand everything that is happening in this packed 3 years. Not many people remember the fact that the crack in the wall was always leading to the return of the Time Lords, because of the gap between the overuse of it in Season 5 to the one use in Season 6 and then the one use in Season 7. During that time, you were then introduced to River Song, Manon Kavarian, the Impossible Astronaut, the Silence, the Tesselector, the Oldest Question Hidden in Plain Sight, the Great Intelligence, the Impossible Girl, and the Siege of Trenzalore. That's too much to then quantify the return of the Time Lords 3 years after they returned beforehand. Moffat tried to go beyond anything seen before, but bigger is not always better. The Time of the Doctor feels like a swan song, encapsulating the essence of what this story was always leading to. The end of 11 at the Siege of Trenzalore. The promise of the reveal of the name of the Doctor is explained away as not being important. He is the Doctor, and that is enough. Yeah, this is understandable. Everyone knew the reveal would never live up to everyone's expectations. The Time Lords using the narrative device as a key to return to the primary universe is strange though. Not to mention the Time Lords' 180 decision to give the Doctor another set or infinite regenerations. These are the Time Lords that were known to be so evolved from the state of the war, in which their ultimate goal was to ascend to become beings of consciousness alone, destroying the concept of time and eradication of the time vortex. The power of corruption and the absurdity of the war drove the race to their own downfall. I don't see how these people, after being saved by the Doctor trapped in a pocket universe, would then give up on that dream of power and deity. The Doctor gets old, he gets young, and then he regenerates, not learning an awful lot in the process. However, Matt's regeneration speech is beautiful. The idea of acceptance at the end of his existence shows this maturity in which he has gained through his 1194 years in this incarnation. This speech is a fantastic contrast to David's end, showing the fact that we all change, but it's important to remember those who we used to be. This would have been an amazing arc for 11 to go on, showing this sense of immaturity at the beginning of his run to then becoming older and wiser at the end of his tenure. But this is only shown in the final episode. This changed character at the end is jarring on purpose for both Clara and the audience. The Doctor isn't lively with his movements, he greets Clara with a reserved response. This scene solidifies to me the wasted potential of Smith. We see a man who went from declaring everything he is dies with him, so the decision to be isolated from everyone for his well-being and others was the unfortunate reality of David's 6-year-old incarnation. Rather than honouring this last decree from 10, 11 is a new man. As such, he holds different principles, personifying an incarnation which relished in the sense of having his shackles removed from the guilt of the 10th Doctor allowed him to ignore his guilt completely. But this isn't the Doctor. And this can never be the Doctor. Smith's tenure will always be a modelled execution for me. Every moment where emotional weight could have elevated the run was tossed aside, instead focusing on high-concept experimental narratives which test the audience's patience more than anything. This led to the unfortunate downfall of all the pieces being set up from season to season, beginning with the time field of the crack in the wall, an incredible narrative device which left the audience guessing, while also allowing the plot to subtly alter canon of the past run to wipe the slate clean. The erasing of time through a bleeding effect creates a threatening presence for the Doctor to learn what this is. The moment he begins to erase from existence is strong as well, creating the perfect reason as to why this was the fear behind Door 11. Through Moffat's fake-out deaths of 11, the crack is the most effective of the three. Moffat's insistence on making the Doctor destined to die thrice times over diluted the impact of the one that ultimately should have mattered, the end of 11. Instead, it created an underwhelming ending ridiculed by its own creation. The Siege of Trenzalore loses all weight through the muddled narrative bouncing back and forth, thanks to the inclusion of the 50th anniversary. The dangers of pleasing the audience in the moment can doom the future in its existence. This is why I appreciate what Russell did for the 60th anniversary specials. Rather than bringing in multiple Doctors to appease the fanbase, he realised the specials were better served acting as celebrations to eras without sacrificing the narrative told. I don't think people realise how pointless having a multi-Doctor story would be at this point in the Doctor's life. The 50th anniversary works because you have 3 Doctors, each at a turning point of their lives. The War Doctor contemplating the belief of who he is, 10 so set on the fact that he's hung up on the past in which affected his life and everyone around him, 11 blocking out all that trauma and desperately trying to move on. This works perfectly, 3 different ideologies at different states of their lives, all stemming from one moment in history. To do a story like that now would just be fan service with nothing to show for it. 11 would resent 12 for being grumpy and calculated, 13 would just be 11, 14 would be all of them together, and 10 would repeat his arc he already completed. The maturity of 14 shows just how far the Doctor has come as a person through so many incidents which shaped his character. Moffat explored this philosophy so well in the 50th anniversary. This one special resonates with so many people for multiple reasons. Yes, David returned, twice, and I really hope that's the last we see of him. I love 10 as an incarnation, but Doctor Who has to move on now. No, the 50th is beloved so much due to the emotional catharsis of 3 arcs coming to fruition so well. Moffat struck the balance perfectly with this episode, allowing the quieter moments for characters to reflect organically on what is happening while also having the high concept sci-fi elements. Moffat probably tries harder than he ever had with the 50th anniversary, and as a result, the ending of Smith fell short. The takeaway of Smith's run is emptiness. Say what you want with Russell's Deus Ex Machina styled finales. Yeah, that's exactly what they are. But that's not what I focus on when reflecting on the first 4 seasons of the revival. Each season fundamentally changes the characters for better and worse. 11 travelled with the Ponds for 2.5 seasons, and they don't change that much from when they first began. There's no apprehension, there's no conflict, it's all a fun ride, creating this emotional dissonance perpetuating the couple throughout their run. I felt nothing when Amy and Rory died, because they never developed as people, rather like pieces on a chessboard unable to differentiate from their path. Sure, the moment was sad, but them dying never felt like a massive moment that affected them both. Contrast this with Donna's end. The amount of growth she has throughout season 4 of Doctor Who changes her for the better. To have her memory wiped, resetting her essentially to the Donna who was apprehensive and guarded, is devastating in its realisation that travelling in the TARDIS isn't all fun and games and can benefit and destroy those around it. Moffat's insistence of 11's run acting as a fairy tale created a barrier stopping monotony and reality to take place. Without contrast, the Avengers are just that, fairy tales. Each sacrifice, each series arc results in the status quo being the same. It's why I don't look forward to watching a series finale of 11, because it acts as nothing more than a higher budget adventure. There's no emotional payoff. Moffat is an incredible writer, sometimes can be a little pretentious. However, the construction of some of the finales are impeccable when you can pull it apart to see how it all worked. But why should that matter if nothing changed in the grand scheme of things? I would much rather see the Doctor become Space Jesus or Donna pressing buttons to defeat the Daleks, because I know what the main draw of those finales is how they will affect the characters. Doctor Who has existed for so long because of its characters and the relationships between them. Without conflict, this is boring. The reasoning behind the lack of emotional payoff is the absence of flaws. Characters need flaws. Without them, the audience finds it hard to relate to what's going on. Humans are not perfect. To have a character who is creates a sense of walling off accessibility. The Doctor in the past is shown to do the wrong thing and is called out for it, allowing him to grow from the experience. He may essentially be a god who looks human, but deep down, he's a very flawed, reserved individual who wishes for acclamation. 11 has flaws like any other Doctor, but they're never addressed, apart from one instance. The moment where the Doctor receives the tagline "The Man Who Forgets" was a strong moment. It was clear that he was bearing his guilt from day one of this incarnation, unable to comprehend the realization that his past is dark and twisted, but he never learns to let go from this persona. Moffat was fearful of allowing the Doctor to have questionable morals in his run, as it could overshadow his sense of justice. This is possible to do and has been done effectively in the past. The Family of Blood is my favourite story of the revival. It is essentially a character study of the Doctor and what he represents to humanity, both his pros and his cons. Throughout the episode, the Doctor is positioned as this mythical figure who needs to return because he is the only one that can stop the family. Montages flash showing the heroic tendencies of the Doctor, accompanied by epic music every time. But that is only one side of the story. The narrative of the Family of Blood is to essentially shatter the perception of misconceptions, whether that be Britain's outlook on war, which would be reconfigured 1 year later with the First World War, and who the Doctor actually is. John Smith's threat isn't the family, it's the Doctor. The sense that when becoming human, the Doctor never anticipated the belief that he would fall in love, showing this disconnect between himself and humanity. To do this with Tennant was a great decision as well. Because of his incarnation being so human, it paints the characterization as a circumstantial imitation of humanity. It all comes ahead when the Doctor visits Joan for the only time. His arrogance on full display, which is captured in David's nonchalant attitude to her perception that what John Smith was is just a part of him. She reminds him that John Smith died and he looks like him. And if the Doctor had never chosen this place on a whim,
Would anyone here have died?
the comment shakes the Doctor, confronted bluntly the severity of his casual decision-making. Reuniting with Martha, we return to the hero persona where he moves on because he's too scared to turn around once more. His treatment of the family at the end of the episode is incredible also, as it shows just how far he's willing to go when provoked. The fact that we barely see the Doctor in these episodes makes these moments so powerful through the disconnect of losing the protagonist essentially. But Moffat would never show this side of Smith. Unable to organically establish the two sides of his personality, the hero and the god underneath that persona. It could have deepened the incarnation to no end, but alas, it was never touched upon. Smith's tenure is one of confusion, intrigue, apprehension and exhaustion. What Moffat crafted was a legacy which set him aside from any other showrunner, to make good on the promise of high concept adventures, but the whole package is a hollow experience in which I kinda dread going back to. Smith was great as the Doctor, making it his own, something incredibly difficult to do after the pop culture sensation of Tennant. But he did it. Smith's incarnation is loved by many through his whimsy, his mannerisms, the shift in personalities as he tread waters into the darker aspects of the Doctor. His stories were possibly the most ambitious Doctor Who has ever been, but that comes with the caveat of writing yourself in a corner in which it's impossible to escape. This is exactly what Moffat did. 3 seasons of essentially filler culminated in a run so void of emotional payoff it feels like a holiday in terms of the timeline of the Doctor's life. The time when the Doctor was a fairy tale.